Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Ruth Van Alstyne from Hope at Hand. Hope at Hand is a local nonprofit that provides poetry therapy programming for at-risk youth in North Florida. We also host Jack's Poetry Fest every April, which is free of charge and funded by a variety of arts and culture grants, which we will talk about at the end of the program. During the presentation, I will upload QR codes and URLs to direct you to both donation and survey pages. And we'd appreciate if you have to leave early, please download these before you go. And so right now, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Brooks Decker, who will be running today's workshop. So with that, Brooks, go ahead and take it away.
Hi guys, I'm just gonna share my screen here real quick. I said this when we were practicing. I feel like every time I do this is the first time I've ever done it. Can everybody see that? Yeah, we're good to go. Okay. Um, well, we're good to go if I can figure out how to move. Okay, so that's not full screen. Is that still big enough for everybody to see? I think that's going to be easier on my end. Yes. Okay, perfect. Um, so my name is Brooks. I am an instructor with Hope at Hand. So I have been teaching poetry and art, or group facilitation, really is the better term for it. Um, Poetry and art there for the past I have seven-ish years, so quite some time. Um, and so I've done a couple of these Jack's Poetry Fest workshops, and I see some of you are familiar from past years, which is so cool. So thank you so much for being here. I know anybody who's Jack's local is beautiful outside today. So if you are in Florida and at this workshop, I really appreciate it. So I'm going to do something a little different from what I normally do. This workshop is called From Free Verse to Form. And let me just get into this first because this is kind of will explain why I chose this. So at the end of last year, I published a chapbook through a indie press that was doing a chapbook competition. But prior to that, I had been working with an editor. So that's Lynn Skapiak Harlan. So I don't know if you guys can see her, but she's here. So Lynn is an infamous editor in Jacksonville. Amazing. She is, I would say, the queen of form. And when I first started working with her, I only wrote free verse, and I really didn't understand much about poetry at all formally. So I just knew that I had used poetry as a therapeutic tool for myself for a huge portion of my life. And it was basically just, it's what she would call catharsis, which is the first thing that you write down on a page, which is basically like the spilling of feelings and thoughts. And because I had no real understanding of poetry other than just that, I kind of brought her this binder full of just catharsis. And she looked at me and was like, "This isn't poetry." Let me show you what poetry is, and in a loving way. Like she's an amazing human, amazing editor. So I'm saying all of that to say what I learned in the process of doing editing with her was that catharsis and free verse and those kind of more like free flow types of poetry are absolutely poetry. But there are so many forms of poetry, old traditional ways of thinking and writing. And the forms are actually, in my opinion, way harder to navigate than free verse because they really challenge you to take your thoughts and make them fit a template, which is like very outside of anything that I would be interested in most of the time, because I'm very like, I do what I want and I write what I want and whatever. But Lynn really challenged me during the editing process to take some of the free verse stuff and see if I could mold it, if I could fit it into a form, or to take my thoughts and start writing more often in form. Um, and it's not, I wouldn't say that even now, like writing in form isn't my favorite thing. It's not the thing that I go to, but it really grew me as a writer um, to try and get my thoughts and my feelings into a form. So I'm saying all of that to say, I think this is a really beneficial thing for anybody who's writing or trying to become a better writer, especially if you haven't really been writing in form or don't really know what that means or are very intimidated by it, which I was, and I still am. There's a lot of really hard forms um, out there. So I want to start with this. I'm going to try and not talk too much because I really want to give you guys time to write. So what is poetry? Um, is it nothing? Is it everything? There's a lot of popular poets right now that like so on the left, R.H. Sin has like multiple publications that are very popular right now. And so like this is one of his poems. Forgive him, but let him go. So he's got books upon books of this style of poetry, which we can call it a poem. He's calling it a poem, so we can honor that it's a poem. But if you know anything about poetry, you'll notice that there's really no poetic devices used here, right? So there's no metaphor, there's really no tone, there's no mood, there's no rhyme scheme, there's no rhythm, there's not even cadence. It's really more of a statement, right? And so like I think another I don't know if you guys are familiar with R.H. Sin, but like Rupi Kaur, I don't even know if I'm saying that name properly, but it's very similar, right? So it's mostly someone who's just sharing these like little snippets of what's like inner dialogue or thought. And they're calling it poetry, so we all kind of go, okay, that's poetry, but for the most part a lot of that is lacking poetic device. And I'm not saying that judgmentally. It's not my favorite, I will be honest, but again, people are entitled to share their thoughts and feelings however they want. So we have this one version that's like, I feel like the far extreme of like literally nothing poetic really about this. And then William Shakespeare, where there's so many poetic devices used. There's the iambic pentameter, there's syllables that are read in rhythm, there's a rhyme scheme, and then I kind of gave, I'm showing the rhyme scheme where the lines, if you're familiar with the way poetry, when you talk about rhyme scheme, so like A, B, A, B, so first stanza, if you think of the first chunk, if you're familiar with the stanza, like the first four lines of a poem, the rhyme pattern is A, B, A, B. So there's the concept of a rhyme scheme here. But I just wanted to put this up here to kind of make the point that people have very different ideas about what poetry is. It's a very broad spectrum. So you can go from this very basic, very little being said to someone like Shakespeare, who is obviously using way more poetic device. There's way more form and thought in how he's putting his ideas together. So I wanted to start with like a brainstorm. I know not everybody has off the top of their head just something they have been thinking of writing a poem about and haven't got around to it. So when I brainstorm, I have it set up. These are kind of the same thing set up two different ways because people's minds work differently. And so visually, some things work better than others. So kind of when you're brainstorming, I tend to do on the left, say you want to write a poem about I have spring, self, home, and then just kind of the first thoughts that come to my mind when I'm thinking about those things. You can use an experience here. If you went to a concert last week or a birthday party, some of the things that come to your mind about it? Colors, smells, something that somebody said to you while you were there, anything anything really works when we're just talking about brainstorming. So you can do that in a listy kind of way. Sometimes I do the circle. I use my daughter's name is Presley, so I, use that example where I'm just kind of offshooting what are different things that I think about when I think about Presley, and just kind of start with that. So just so you guys know, the goal here is we're trying to write a little something in free verse and then kind of move it into a form. So that's the goal for this workshop, is to start that process. So I'm going to give you about 6 minutes, 5 or 6 minutes, excuse me, to brainstorm something you feel like you can write about. I don't know why warmth is capitalized on my PowerPoint. Sorry. All right, I'm gonna set a timer. Also, feel free to ask a question. If you have any questions, you can like unmute yourselves and just ask. I don't mind that. All right. Did everybody have enough time to jot a few things down? You can just give me a thumbs up if I can see you. Okay. Okay, so the next part of this is just trying to formulate a free verse poem with your ideas. So free verse doesn't have a major structure, but you do want to try to incorporate some poetic device, metaphor, symbolism, tone, mood, because what you're not looking to do is just kind of create something that feels like a dialogue or a story. So try to use some poetic components, personification, um, anything that makes it feel less like you just speaking and more like something that is poetic. So I'm going to give we got time. I'm going to give like 10 minutes, and if we need a few more minutes, we can take it. But I want to give you 10 minutes. This doesn't have to be anything prolific. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't even really have to be. This is like a very rough draft. So nobody's going to share this. It's just trying to get your thoughts now in order in a way that creates more of a poem than a brainstorm.
Can I ask something? So you said staying away from prose, so no prose poetry, right?
No, I mean you can write prose if you want. The ultimately whatever you write, we're just trying to translate into a form. So I think you'll have an easier time moving it into form if it's less prosy, less narrative. But this is for you to play around with. I'm not going to tell you there's a right or wrong way. I'm just trying to make it as easy as possible when we get into moving to like a form. But I mean, technically, you could write prose and then pluck different pieces from the prose when we get to the form part. That's not something that just wouldn't work. Give you about another 3 minutes. All right, if you are still working on free verse, feel free to keep writing. I'm going to pull up the part about just kind of starting to talk about form. And I've picked, I don't, if you're familiar with form and there's a form that you like and you'd like to try, please feel free to do that. I have picked a couple of forms that are easier to start with when you're first starting to think about trying to create something in form. You're also probably mostly have at least heard of a haiku. If you think you haven't, you did one in elementary school at some point, without a doubt. So a haiku is 3 lines. I don't know if any of you attended Lynn's workshop. She did a haiku workshop and Lynn, say the word. Meet yourself and tell them.
Senryu.
Sanryu, which are both forms of Japanese poetry. And she was telling me, I didn't even know this. And for the sake of just something simple today, we'll stick with what I have. But a haiku, we are generally taught, is 3 lines. It's line 1 is 5 syllables, line 2 is 7, line 3 is 5. But she actually learned and was telling me that it doesn't even have to be that exact syllable count, and that when something is translated from Japanese to English, it doesn't necessarily translate to that syllable count. Really, the only kind of rule there is the first 2 lines have to be shorter than the center line. And a haiku generally is about nature. But for the sake of this, like freedom to explore creating a haiku that's not about nature, I do that often. A tanka is similar to a haiku in that it's short and it's got a very specific syllable pattern. So it's line 1 is 5 syllables, line 2 is 7, line 3 is 5, line 4 is 7, line 5 is 7. So it's just kind of a longer version of a haiku. It gives you a little more space to add add thoughts. A limerick is usually funny, doesn't have to be funny. I'm using the format of a limerick to get you thinking in a rhyme scheme. So again, like freedom to explore. Like I said, I'm not really a rule follower. So all of these forms do have like rules in that they generally are, haiku is generally nature, a limerick is generally funny. But I'm open to, just for the sake of exploring, doing whatever you want with it, especially because we're trying to create something from what you've already written, which may not be about nature and it may not be funny. So a limerick is really just about the rhyme scheme. It's another short poem. So it's 5 lines, and then I have the rhyme scheme listed there with kind of an example, because I know sometimes those listings can look a little confusing. And then an isometric stanza, which is any subject as long as all lines consist of the same syllable count. So your goal is to take the concept from whatever you've written in your free verse and try and make it work in one of these 4 forms. Also, freedom to Google Forms. What I'll tell you is that it gets very complicated and there are very, very many of them. So I tried to pick something that is kind of the easiest way to start navigating forms. What generally happens is, I know what was most challenging for me anyway was getting your thoughts. Forms require you generally to whittle your thoughts down. And so, whereas in free verse, we tend to use a lot of unnecessary words. So this is another great thing that I learned from Lynn. We use a lot of like and that and the when we're writing free verse, because free verse again tends to be more narrative, more dialogue. So the challenge with form is you have to kind of cut your words down and really try and get to the point of what you're trying to say in a shorter, more concise format. And so whether you're doing this form, or if you go on to play around with form, or even just to play around with free verse, I would really encourage you to, as your like rough draft and then, first draft, second draft, whatever, pay attention to how often you use filler words and kind of play around with what happens when you cut them out. They can't all be cut out. Sometimes it sounds weird when you cut something out that feels very purposed, but a lot of times there's filler words that really have no purpose. So for the next, what do we got? We got about 20 minutes. So I'm going to give you another 10, 15 minutes to kind of play around with any of these. So use what you already have. See if you can squeeze it into a haiku, tanka, limerick, or the isometric stanza. Feel free to try to start again without even using what you have, like full freedom to just mess around with any of this. Please ask me questions if you have any, and I'm going to set my timer again. Is everybody like following? Are we all so weird doing virtual things to like blank screens? I'm gonna assume everybody's okay. Few more minutes here, guys. All right, so if you're still working, keep working. We just have a few minutes left, and I always like to give a little bit of time if there is any brave soul out there who would like to share either their free verse or their form, or share their thoughts about the process. Yeah, Angela, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Angela, and I've written a tanka or something along those lines. Anyway, not sure the syllable count is in 100%, but never mind. Let me find this. I've scribbled. Right. Oh, to be a flower, emerging green through brown, replenishing by warmth, rain, dog breath, never questioning its place, family.
Thank you for being brave enough to share. Just curious, what was your free verse like brainstorm, or did you have one?
I did actually the one that you had on your screen, which was spring, self, and home. So
Okay.
those sort of, yeah.
Oh, very cool. Thank you for sharing. Chris.
Hi, can you hear me? I tried the isometric stanza, and it's about a remembrance garden in Dublin. Hidden within these mean and narrow streets, microcosm of memory far from bustle, where symbolic broken swords, arrows, shields mirrored in the stillness of crossed waters, weep for children caught in transformation, denied humanity but granted flight. Here in this unexpected place of peace, take respite from our personal troubles, dwell on older, greater sacrifices, dwarf daily concerns, relieving burden, yet invokes a wish to be that doomed child, reborn as bird, set free of life's constraints, a nugget of blessing in every curse, only for those who will themselves to see.
Thank you so much for sharing. I see Mickey, I see Lynn and Mickey. Lynn, did you have something you wanted to say?
Can you take the PDF off the screen so we can see everybody?
Oh, yeah, I can actually.
Ah,
There we
thank
go.
you.
You're welcome. Um, yeah, thank you so much, Chris. Mickey, did you want to share?
Yeah, I tried the isometric stanza, but this is really, really strange for me because usually I write spoken word. So, like, I had a go at it. I don't know whether it's any good, but here goes. Racing thoughts, reaching nowhere, thinking you have won the race. I'm out of space, out of mind, mindful of your scheming ways, drained. I'm out of sorts, bled dry. I cry tears of cold, red blood. He comes disguised as a drunk, heartless, drunken vampire. At the last drop, he takes flight. He is vanished, stolen, gone. Bitter is the taste of loss.
Was that the isometric?
Yeah, tried to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very cool. Yeah, I love when I say like I feel like form, and I was so uncomfortable with form too, Mickey. I was so
Mm.
intimidated by it. I didn't feel like it was for me. Like there were times where I was like, Lynn, I don't want to write any more forms. But it really has grown me so much as a writer, and
Yeah.
I don't write in form a lot, like I said, but it's really made my
Mm.
free verse better. So it's one
Right.
of those things
Mm.
that, it's just a cool way to challenge yourself and, try something different. So thank you. All
Thank you.
right.
I,
Does anybody else want to share? Lynn, you want to go?
I don't write very much free verse, so this was a different sort for me. Um, Weary and gray days, where is it? No, nature's warm. No, that's not it either. You see my paper, I've written all over it. I use the minutes to scribble. All right. Weary of gray days, April is a sunny lady. Her warmth brings flowers. She turns trees green, leafy. Birds flitter, land at feeder. She brightens my mood.
Thank you. So yeah, that's kind of the gist. I don't really have anything else to teach. We're here at the last minute, but I would totally encourage you to like Google, it's easy Google poetry form, and there's all kinds of websites that will tell you a million different kinds of form and what they are and how to mess around with them. Yeah, Renee.
I try to do a limerick.
Okay.
The construction crew are quiet today. Who knew the rain would keep them away? The clouds unveil the warm spring sun. It shouts. Now it's not raining. Eventually I'll venture out. Oh, oh, but I'll enjoy a Zoom call inside. I'll stay.
Oh,
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, so Google poetry forms if you're interested. There's some really challenging ones. And I think the more challenged you feel by something, the more helpful it'll be in growth, and that kind of goes for everything. So I would encourage you all, if you're writers, to just keep messing around with it. And thank you so much for coming to my workshop.
it was great. Thank you, Brooks.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Brooks. Um, it was a great workshop, and thank you everyone for coming today. I just want to remind everyone your feedback matters. Here is a QR code that you can scan and complete a survey for us and let us know how you like these poetry workshops. And we would like to also thank our sponsors. These are a few of our larger sponsors, and thank our small private donors. Without them, we could not do these workshops or put on Jack's Poetry Fest or do the poetry workshop, therapy poetry workshops that we carry on throughout North Florida for the at-risk youth. So also, thank you for the support, and this is a QR code that you can follow to make a private donation to Hope at Hand. And with that, I want to thank again everyone for coming, and that was a great workshop. So we'll see you again, perhaps tomorrow or sometime next week. So